Furina definitely has an Arcan's look about her, what with her hydro-colored streaks of hair. Oh, wait. You could even say she gets treated like one. After all, she gets to take the highest seat in the Opera Epiclese and is beloved by her people. But that's about it. At the end of the day, Neuvillette and the Oratrice are the de facto rulers of Fontaine. They issue out the justice the nation so reveres, and it is the Chief Justice who takes to the front lines when dealing with more pressing matters, such as the rise of the primordial sea. Furina looks like a god, but she does not act like one, nor is she perceived as one. Her own people treat her as more of a celebrity than their Arcan. She's a good source of entertainment, if a little dramatic, so they are willing to play along with her. But they do not even call her by her godly name. The people of the other nations usually address their deity by their demon name or by a title that shows their reverence. There's the Almighty Shogun, there's Barbatus, there is even Rex Lapis because simply calling him Morax would not be respectable enough. Much how like the ancient people of Enkanomiya addressed Istaroth as Kairos, and did not even dare spell out her real name as they did not deem themselves worthy enough. But in Fontaine, all you will hear is Lady Furina this, Lady Furina that. And that's really telling of what the Fontainians think of her. Meanwhile, if you were to ask the knave, you would be met with an even more radical point of view. Arlecchino does not believe Furina is an Arcan. In fact, she doubts she is even a god. And you know what? She may be right. So today, we will be exploring Furina's plan to stop the prophecy hanging over Fontaine, 2 theories regarding what she is, and whether or not she is a real Hydro Arcan, and who will ultimately be in charge of the Hydro Nation by the end of this chapter. But before that, quick disclaimer. I will be including a voice line from Neuvillette as was a very important part of the story of the upcoming patches. It is not a leak, it is in-game. I found that out the hard way. If you wish to go into the next patches blind, I will add a warning as soon as we get to that part so you know to click off. Also, consider not fully ascending the Hydro Dragon. With that said, let's go ahead and dive in. Just remember to, like always, take everything with a grain of salt. Furina is weak. That is undeniable. It is said that the top 3 Harbingers are on par with the Arcans in terms of power, but the Knave is only 4th out of 11, meaning no Arcan should have a hard time dealing with her. Granted, number 8, Signora, managed to snatch Ventus' noses, but I still believe Barbatus allowed her to take it. Meanwhile, Furina stood no chance. She didn't even put up a fight. All she did was cower in fear and beg for her life, before running back to her room to cry. So clearly, something is very wrong here. This behavior led the Knave to doubt whether or not she's a god at all, but while the scene was not animated, we know exactly what happened. Arlecchino plunged her hand through Furina's chest. That's what the Harbingers always do when trying to steal a Gnosis. Despite that, she was not injured in any way. Well, not physically. So whatever she is, we can rule out a human imposter or anything of the kind. Furina is definitely on the realm of the quote-unquote supernatural. That said, Furina may not be Focalor. Not completely, at least. A lot of people have theorized that she has a split personality, which explains her drastically contrasting behavior, from loud and proud to quiet and nervous. Personally, I really don't think this is the case. Furina's behavior is actually really consistent with that of someone faking confidence. She constantly reminds everyone of her Arcan status, as if to convince them, and perhaps even herself. She feigns strength whenever possible, like how she immediately challenged the traveler to a duel upon meeting them, but only because she thought they would be too scared to take her up on it. To me, this proves she is used to bluffing her way through things. She pretends to be confident so her people will trust her to guide them, especially at the moment when the tensions are running high due to the prophecy. She's dramatic and makes a grand deal out of the trials because that will get her people's attention and feed the Oratrice to produce indemnitium. And sure, if her theatrics get her some love, she will take it. After all, she really needs some validation, as she is terrified of messing up. We only get to see the real Furina when we get a sneak peek into her inner talk. She's constantly second-guessing herself and beating herself over her mistakes, like how her entire demeanor changed after falsely accusing Lini. Furina pretends to be someone she's not, but for all that, she's still incredibly genuine. She cares for her people and the justice she's meant to uphold. and that's taking its toll on her, as seen in her most vulnerable moment, when the Fountain of Lucine carries the tears she cries alone at night.
So interminable, so lonely. Just how much longer?
This little monologue of hers is actually incredibly relevant, so don't forget it. For now though, all that matters is that this proves that Furina cares about Fontaine, so she wouldn't lie about her efforts to protect it. And yet she's at a loss for words whenever someone inquires about the Oratrice. The knave believes it is being prepared to somehow deal with the Primordial Sea, which I'd go as far as to say that we can be pretty sure is the case. For one, it produces indemnitium, one of the two unique energy systems within Fontaine, but while the other one, Arc, is being used to power automatons, it appears indemnitium doesn't have a use. Arlecchino claims the Oratrice has been storing a massive amount of energy over the years, maybe roughly 400 years. You see, Nouvelette's trailer is really interesting because it features a vanishing Oratrice. In the first shot we get of the opera epiclase, it is absent. Yet when we next return to the courtroom, it appears in all of its enlarged glory. But if you fast forward to the end of the trailer, it disappears again. What's more, this shot takes place after Nouvelette says that the tumult shall give way to lasting peace, and Furina asks, "Is the trial over already?" I interpret this as a prophecy having already come to pass, one way or another. The trial has already ended because the verdict is out for the people of Fontaine, so the Oratrice being absent indicates it is no longer needed, lending credibility to the idea that its sole purpose is to stop the rise of the Primordial Sea. On the other hand, I believe the beginning of the trailer is meant to represent the distant past, one when Nouvelette was likely still new to the share of the Iudex. We know he took on his role over 400 years ago, so after Ejiri's death and Focalors' rise to archonhood, meaning Lady Furina was likely the one that offered him this position and created the Oratrice shortly after, which is also incredibly relevant, so don't forget about that. And we know that she was the one who created it, as people turned to her for answers when it somehow found Child guilty. They also literally stated she was the one who made it. So, however indemnitium is meant to go about saving Fontaine, it seems pretty clear that's Furina's plan, and one that has been in the making for over 4 centuries. After all, even her predecessor, Egeria, knew of the Primordial Sea as she sent her repenting criminals to keep an eye on it in what would eventually become the Fortress of Meropide. But if Furina is powerful and cunning enough to prepare all of this, why is she so weak and clueless at present? Enter theory number 1. Furina isn't Focalor. Kinda. No, I'm still not talking about split personalities. Rather, I'm claiming that Furina might be a golem. For 2 main reasons. So, what the heck is a golem? The god king Remus, who ruled over Remuria, a kingdom that once occupied present-day Fontaine, was also extremely worried about the rise of the Primordial Sea, though the Remurian prophecy was even more hardcore. There was no mention of the Fontainians being tainted with the original sin and being the only targets on the hit list. Instead, the sea didn't discriminate. Its waves were rated E for everybody. Their prophecy stated that the Primordial Sea would one day swallow all life, and anything which did not originate from it would be filtered out as waste. Now keep in mind that the Remurians also believed that all life originated from the sea. Thus, the only way for something to not belong to it would be if it were inorganic, right? And or the sender, I suppose. Well, Remus definitely seems to have believed so. He created a golden ichor that he used to hold these people's minds and souls, which he would later put in special, magically made golems, as he believed that way they could all escape the flood. And if you remember, the current prophecy predicts that after the sea rises, only Furina will be left, weeping alone on her throne, meaning she cannot be dissolved. Therefore, she must not be organic. She must not be the original Focalor. There is also an easy explanation, namely that, being a god, she's technically not a Fontainian and not born with original sin, but that is such a massive cop-out. I don't believe Genshin would ever pull that one on us, thankfully, and it also wouldn't explain anything else. So Furina would be a golem containing only part of the soul and mind of Focalor. This means she would be lacking many of her original memories, like gods often do after expending far too much elemental power, or even how Neuvillette doesn't remember everything from his past incarnation, which could explain why she doesn't seem to know anything about the Oratrice, though it is also possible she's just hiding the truth. And if you remember her cries in the Fontaine of Lucine, she talks about how lonely she is, because she's separated from herself, kinda like how Nahida sought Rukkhadevata out for guidance. So where is the rest of her? Lini gave us both the right question and the right answer to solve that mystery. The Oratrice has consciousness despite being a machine. That has to stem from somewhere, and within the room containing the core of the Oratrice, a voice can be heard. I believe this is none other than Focalors. Focalors would have left the golem behind for the same reasons Archons always seem to leave behind replacements, in order to care for a nation. Think about how Rukkhadevata created Nahida so that she could finish erasing the forbidden knowledge from Irminsul and watch over Sumeru, or how Makoto didn't tell A she was going to fight in the Cataclysm because she couldn't have her sister follow her when Inazuma needed her so much. Furina, even with her diminished power, would keep on guiding the Fontainians and would be able to install the Oratrice into the justice system, as well as bolstering the people's interest in the trials in order to feed it. Now, if you don't believe that Focalors is in the Oratrice because you think it is being powered by the noses, you are not alone. I consider the same possibility, but I came to the conclusion it is unlikely. And this is because Egeria sent her convicts to the bottom of the sea to protect her secrets, even before the Fortress of Meropith came to be. This means that back then, there wasn't even a sluice gate holding the sea back. The only thing I can think of that could be serving this purpose is the noses. Perhaps that is even what is meant by her secret. Focalors may have never been in direct possession of her chess piece to begin with. Moreover, the knave believes that the noses is in the fortress at present, and the Fatui don't seem to operate based on guesses. I have another theory though. Instead of being a golem, Furina might be an Oceanid, in which case she wouldn't be Focalors at all. Unless Focalors herself was also an Oceanid, like how Morax is an Adeptus? I don't know, the origin of the gods is very confusing. Anyway, this one is based on how the Primordial Sea seems to create Oceanids out of the collective consciousness of the people it dissolves. Oceanids are creatures of pure hydro, and they seem to react differently to the sea. After all, they are able to join to this collective and then become their own individuals again in time, like how Petit Chou, All, and the rest of the gang did. So, if Furina was an Oceanid, even if she was dissolved by the sea, there is always a possibility she would be able to re-emerge. Her design also reminds me of an Oceanid's flippers, but so does Neuvillette, so oh well. But mostly, this would explain why the Oceanids hate Furina so much. After Egeria died, the waters in Fontaine turned bitter, threatening the life of the Oceanids that used to live there and forcing most of them to flee. We really don't know what caused this at present. It could have been Furina somehow, or just a side effect of the Cataclysm, but one way or another, the Oceanids refuse to see Focalors as their god. But it goes beyond that. They expect her to have it out for them. When Rhodia sensed Endora in her waters, she immediately assumed she was there to kill her. Which is strange because we know Oceanids were meant to love every creature and to be as connected to one another and the remaining life as much as possible. If Furina was an Oceanid, the Lockfolk could perceive her as a traitor for not only supporting Focalors, but also for taking the place that, in their mind, rightfully belongs to Egeria, hence why they expect the killer Oceanid to come stalking in the night. If Focalors did transfer consciousness into the Oratrice and had no way of leaving any of it behind, she would still need someone to keep up appearances, and the power of water is its ability to take any shape. An Oceanid's desire for connection could also give a whole new meaning to the loneliness Furina feels, as she would be completely isolated from her kind and everyone else. That said, I don't personally feel like this last theory holds a lot of water. I'm definitely leaning more toward the Golem one, but one way or another, Focalors may never be able to return to her original self, and I don't think she expects to. So who will rule Fontaine in the future? This is where the extremely spoilery voice line comes into play, so I'll give you a second to click off if you don't wish to hear it. You are going to stay? Okay then, listen to this.
Now that I have reclaimed one of the 7 authorities from the hands of the usurpers, I have regained my true form. I am now a fully fledged dragon, powerful enough to judge the rest of the gods. My final destiny is to judge the usurper king in the heavens above. But until that time comes, I will lend my power to you.
I'd be lying if I said that I understand why the devs added this when they did, but this changes everything. Neuvillette claims to have reclaimed his power. Not yet, sometime in the future patches. The only thing that was preventing him from being at full power was the fact that he was missing the authority that had been taken from the original Hydro Sovereign. An authority being a Gnosis, meaning Neuvillette will claim the Hydra Gnosis for himself. Which, side note, means that the Fatui have suffered their first real loss, at least a temporary one. They may still attempt to get it back from a Dragon Sovereign at full power. Yeah, good luck with that. I'm excited to see what this means for Tsarits's plan. Regardless, prior to the Primordial One's arrival, the 7 Dragon Sovereigns ruled over the 7 nations. Now, for the first time since the war, one of them has regained his authority. Neuvillette is now in a position to truly rule over Fontaine, especially if Focalors really isn't at full power and isn't capable of recovering said power. And again, I do think Furina/Focalors has been preparing everything to allow the Chief Justice to rule. Think about it. Furina is no stranger to court proceedings. We even saw her prosecuting Lini, and she does chime in on most trials, even if she does not issue a verdict of her own. Moreover, Neuvillette's true role is to preside over the trial. Him declaring someone guilty or otherwise is more of a formality than anything else. After all, it is the Oratrice that has the final say. So, at the end of the day, Furina doesn't need a Chief Justice. She definitely does not need one that just happens to be the Hydra Dragon. We know there were others who occupied the position of Iudex before Neuvillette, after all. And yet, she not only allows him to be the Chief Justice, but she may also have been the one who offered him the position as far as we know. She also never tries to outshine him, even with all of her dramatics. She respects him, and in turn, so do her people. Lini once claimed that Neuvillette is the real symbol of Fontaine's justice. A bit harsh, given that he isn't the Archon, but you know what? Furina agrees. During Neuvillette's story quest, he leaves the Palais Mermonia to investigate the case personally, so he writes a note explaining his absence and leaves it on his desk for Furina. You know what she replied with? She said she was glad he was going out because he should get closer to his people. Not the people of Fontaine, his people. Despite having served the land of Hydra for over 400 years, the Hydra Dragon still sees himself as an outsider, but Furina is actively encouraging the opposite. This is why I get the feeling that Focalors isn't expecting to make it out of this hole. That and the nose is being in Neuvillette's hands. If the Fatui didn't manage to snatch it, I'd expect the Archon to keep it even if it is no longer being used for any specific purpose. But that is not what is going to happen. If there is any truth to this theory, Focalors would have spent their entire reign protecting her people without anyone being any the wiser. And she would even have prepared a successor on top of that. There is even some foreshadowing for this in Neuvillette's first character story. One time, when the tabloids were hounding him for a statement, he claimed that Iudex was simply one of the many hats he wore, and that his time as a judge was only a phase of his life. The journalists, however, ran wild with it and came out with this monstrosity of a title. Shocking news! Neuvillette claims Iudex to be springboard post. Unspeakable plans next. Where will his ambition end? Implying he wished to obtain a higher station in life. And who stands above the Iudex? As far as we are aware, only the Hydro Archon herself. The funny thing is, despite his apparent lack of ambition, his story presents us with this line. As for the new rumors, Neuvillette paid them no heed. Perhaps they were, in fact, right on the Mora, and he simply did not correct them out of principle. No one knows. Ominous, isn't it? But instead of acquiring his post through treachery, he may have been played like everyone else. Just another pawn in Focalors' chessboard. As for Furina, if this comes to pass, she may even remain as the Archon in name only, as to not upset the status quo and attract Slash's attention, like Neuvillette himself put it. But at that point, she will likely only be a figurehead, and not the true Archon at all. This might actually be an outcome she wants though. After all, she keeps on asking when will this end. Honestly, this would make for an incredibly complex and interesting character, so I wouldn't mind his outcome. But what do you think? Is Furina a Focalor? If not, who or what is she? And who do you think will be sitting the metaphorical and physical throne of Fontaine once it is all said and done? Do let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. The Furina brain rot is real. Anyway, my name is Blue, and I'll see you again soon. Safe journey, travelers!